So hi, good afternoon. So we're going to start this afternoon with a talk by Terry Culver, who is the CEO of ETC Labs. I have been talking with Terry an awful lot over these past few months and really got to build a good working relationship and trust. And you know, ETC Labs have had a huge contribution into the change that we've seen on ETC this year. You know, we are really moving, and an awful lot of that effort is coming from you know, developers and investment on their side. So really really happy to welcome Terry to the stage.
I don't get a hug? Here we go.
You know, I don't want to intrude.
Hi there. So the talk after lunch is also known as the nap talk. So if anybody nods off, that's perfectly fine. If I nod off, someone prod me. So I keep talking. Let's start with the Gambia. This was my first project out of college. And to my mind, throughout my career, it's been a cautionary tale about adoption of technology. We were hired in 1993 to build a computerized tax system. If you don't know, the Gambia is a small sliver of the country on the west coast of Africa, surrounded by Senegal. And they had been depending on a British colonial paper tax collection system, which certainly wasn't efficient, if it ever was. And the government was hoping that this new system would put them on better financial footing and increase payment rates. The Gambia, like many countries, suffered from you know, low participation in the formal economy. It still does. After 3 years, after building a digital tax system, after building a data center, after assigning everybody in the country tax ID numbers, after creating what we thought was a successful project with both political and social support, it all came to a grinding halt 2 weeks before it was supposed to launch. A colonel in the army, Yahya Jammeh, took power in a swift and decisive military coup. None of us saw it coming. And it was pre-internet days, or pre-mass adoption of the internet days, and certainly pre-cell phone days. So this was crisis management by fax. And our first concern, obviously, was to get our team out, which we did. And our second concern, obviously, was the future of the project, which we felt was important for, you know, the population. You know, Jammeh claimed that he would give power back within 2 weeks and return to a democratic system. As these things go, he stayed in office for 20 years and only left in 2016. And as you can imagine, our tax reform project never went anywhere. And that story sticks with me. As we think about the technology that we're building here, that many of you are building, as excellent as it may be, its adoption and implementation may very well be subject to political and social influences well beyond our control. And so to my mind, it's important to really have at the forefront of our thinking how this is going to be used, what resistance it's going to face, and who's going to resist it and why. Since the Gambia, I went on to work on a number of projects for the Harvard Institute for International Development, the United Nations, several countries directly in Sub-Saharan Africa, India, Bolivia, and so on. And in the course of that work, my colleagues and I always came up against certain systemic issues that would hinder us in what we were trying to do, things over which we had no influence. And around 2015, I started to look at blockchain as one possible way to deal with some of those systemic issues, a way that you could avoid having to deal with corrupt or weak institutions, a way that you could deliver to people a mechanism for peer-to-peer exchange or a certain kind of economic independence. It hasn't provided that yet, but I still think it has the potential to do that. And that's why I'm here. That's why one of the many reasons why we established ETC Labs. And that goal is really what informs our mission. We are trying to do three things, more complicated than this slide would indicate. The first is obviously build high-quality technology. And, I come to this not as a developer. I'm sure our development team will confirm that emphatically. And I don't come at it as an investor. I come at it as a humanitarian. And, even with that, the core of everything we do has to be the technology. It has to be innovative, has to be sound, has to be robust. The second is we're committed to building what I think of as communities of value. And by that I mean communities where people can engage in economic activity in a peer-to-peer way, in a trustless way, in a way that can only be achieved, as far as I know, through a blockchain. And also communities of value where you have a certain amount of economic independence and integrity that can only be derived from a public blockchain. And that's really what led us to Ethereum Classic to begin with. And then the third is fulfilling the social promise of blockchain, which I'll talk a bit more about later on. Before I talk more about ETC Labs, I'd like to just take a minute to acknowledge something that maybe we all know but don't talk enough about, which is that ETC is growing. What started as an important statement about governance and immutability has turned into a major public blockchain. That's no small feat. And it's in large part due to many of the people here in this room. And so I'd like to just take a minute to, give respect and credit where it's due. Anthony, I think you've really been at the forefront of that. Donald, Kevin, many of our developers. I hope you can take a minute to just acknowledge what you've accomplished. So. And then also our development team, I think, is working away at a great pace. You can look at the number of commits and the work happening on the development side. And you can also see the growth on the community side, which we count as somewhere upwards of 15,000 people, maybe more. We expect that growth to continue. And it's, I think, all moving in the right direction. If you don't know, the dev team is organized into three sort of sub-teams. One focuses on tooling with Shane, Zach, and Zane, and they're, I think, all here. We have the protocol team that works primarily on the client, and then we have the EVM team. And as I mentioned, they'll talk much more about what they're working on. But we're really proud that they're part of ETC Labs. I think those developers could be doing other things. They could be working with other organizations. And we're really happy that they're working with us and working on ETC. We also have key technology partners. We don't think that we can do this alone or should. So we work quite closely with ChainSafe, and Aiden is here today, I think. Hey, Aiden. And also with Whiteblock. We'll be adding to this list of partners in the year ahead. But we think that they bring additional expertise, additional insight, and additional perspective that helps us as we grow. And then in terms of creating communities of value, there's a couple different expressions of this. We launched earlier this year what we call the Studio Program, and that's an effort to try to encourage projects to deploy on Ethereum Classic. We've signed up more than 12 projects now, as well as certain channel partners who will bring additional projects to Ethereum Classic. It's all well and good to have a blockchain, but if nobody's using it, that's a problem. So this program is really trying to solve that problem in an accelerated way. The second is that coming this year, we will be launching a whole bunch of bounties and hackathons. We are in active discussions with Gitcoin, and I think Scott might be able to talk a bit more about that later today. But please stay tuned for some good news there. And then the last is that we will be launching later this year a managed index service for Ethereum Classic. So an Infura-like service that will be free It will supplement your good work with Ether cluster. And we feel that this is a necessary piece of infrastructure that needs to be in place in order for Ethereum Classic to grow. The other thing we're doing is we're actively looking to collaborate more closely with the Ethereum community and ETH1X. This, I think, is a subject of active debate in our community. It's, Ethereum Classic was established around the principles of immutability and security, and rightfully so. We'll stick to those principles. We're committed to a proof-of-work consensus algorithm. Nonetheless, we do share some values with the Ethereum community. We share DNA. We share technical functionality. This is reflected in our technical roadmap. It's reflected in the partnerships that we're developing or trying to develop. And so it makes sense to us that we should work more closely together. We believe that we can do this while maintaining our core principles, that collaboration does not necessarily mean compromise. In fact, just the opposite. I think this is something that we feel strongly about, and I think we'll have more details about that as this develops later in the year. It's in the early stage, but it is a core commitment to our work in the year ahead. And then our accelerator. And where's Liz? Liz and Ankit, I don't think ETC Labs would really be anywhere if it weren't for the work that you've done around the accelerator. We've just started our third cohort in the labs. And, we're seeing more applications. We're seeing more mature projects. We're seeing a higher degree of technical ability. And we're seeing true commitment to public blockchain, all the things we want to see. And this is really an effort to develop the ecosystem. It's, I think, a counterbalance to the development work that the core team is doing so that you can grow at the social level as well as at the technical level. And we'll still be offering the same things the accelerator offers, office space, investment, financial and business development support, technical support, and introductions and network building to technical partners, financial partners, and other partners. And just to give you a sense of who is in the current cohort and who's, I think, growing in a really positive way, here's a quick list. I won't run through them all. Some of them like Ethernode. I think they're speaking either today or tomorrow. And Second State is here. They're collaborating with us on the LLVM work. And they just launched their BITL IDE, which will make it easier for developers to build on blockchain. So I think, the accelerator is really moving in a great direction, and we expect continued growth there. The last thing I want to talk about is, what I mean by fulfilling the social promise of blockchain. We have very much in the forefront of our minds three fundamental transformations taking place. The first is demographic, and this map shows it. It's a proportional map showing the distribution of the global population by the year 2050. By that time, there'll be approximately 9.8 billion people on the planet, most of whom will live in Asia and South Asia. Coinciding with that population growth will be mass urbanization. So for the first time in human history, most people will live in cities. The second transformation is financial. Already there are hundreds of millions of people who do not participate in the formal economy. Some estimates place it somewhere between 60 and 80% of the population in emerging markets don't have a bank account, they don't pay taxes, they don't appear on any formal kind of economic activity whatsoever, but yet they make a living. This will only increase in this part of the world as the population grows. And then the third transformation is digital, something about which we all know, and many of you know better than I do. Our being here is a testament to our recognition of the digital transformation taking place. Put together, all this means that in the next few years, most of the people will live in a part of the world that doesn't have the necessary infrastructure to support them. They'll live in urban areas and high concentrations, and they will earn their livings and make their lives in ways that are unfamiliar to us in mature economies. To me, this is an exceptional use for blockchain. We often think about blockchain adoption as a trade-off between censorship resistance and transaction finality. But for most of the people in this part of the world, they've never had transaction finality. If they're in the informal economy, that doesn't exist. Even if they have a bank account, transactions are slow, the institutions are weak, or the people within them are corrupt. Even if people buy land, it's never quite clear that they actually hold title to it. Even if they accumulate some form of wealth, there's always political risk that it could disappear. So the idea that you have to have this trade-off, it's certainly something we think about in this part of the world, but it's something that people are already experiencing, and therefore I think the threshold for adoption is very different in the world that we will see in 2050 than it is now. So as we think about the partnerships we engage in the year ahead, as we think about the technical roadmap, it's really working towards a point where ETC and blockchain more generally can provide service and resources to the people who will be living in this part of the world who currently don't have them. Thank you for listening to me. I hope if you got a nap, it was a good one. And if you stayed awake, I hope it was worthwhile. Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions for Terry?
Yeah.
What then do we need to put in place now? Thank you. So what then do we need to put in place now to facilitate this adoption at a greater pace? Yes, there's recognition of value elsewhere, but sadly we, for better or for worse, appear to be the decision makers in the first world to establish these patterns. And I hope that does not remain to be the case, but the fact is, what can we actually institute now and where within our societies to open up minds to the adoption of these new frameworks?
I think it's a tough question. I think the first two things that we have to do is, one, stick to core principles. I think despite whatever resistance there may be, we have to stick to the core principle and value of a public blockchain. That's where, people in this part of the world are going to start to see the real value. That's where the adoption, even if it's more difficult at the beginning, is going to be greatest. I think the second is we have to be willing to evolve while maintaining those principles. We are in the very early stage of figuring out what this technology is and what it can do and how people can use it. So, we probably don't even really know yet where people are going to find the greatest value in it. So I think we need to be open-minded to it for surprises, for discoveries, for unexpected things. That's it. Okay, thank you. Oh, Kevin?
What does the road look like for ETC Labs? How committed is ETC Labs going forward with Ethereum Classic? Could you give maybe 5 years, 10 years? What are you thinking?
This is till death do us part. We're all in. I don't know what else to say.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.